Tom Arbuthnot, welcome into the pod, mate. Now, it's great to have you. Finally, we've got a chance to have a chat. Well, almost in person, as close as in person as we're probably going to get for a little while. But good to have you on, mate.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, we're usually going back and forth on chat or on LinkedIn, so it's nice to do a real time video to video. We're literally opposite sides of the world, aren't we? So I think this is as close as we'll get
We
until
are.
we're next at the same in person conference or something.
We are. Now, for everybody watching and listening, mate, just give us a little bit about who is Tom Arbuthnot. What is it that you're doing right now? What's keeping you busy?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, thanks for having me on again. So the history is UC. So used to be way back. I was with one of the Cisco Call Manager IP telephony launch partners. I jumped over to the Microsoft side of the world around Office Communication Server 2010, for people who can remember that, Link, and then Skype for Business. And then Skype for Business all went to Microsoft Teams. And through that journey, mostly enterprise global customers, initially deploying then strategy. In the last 2 years, I kind of jumped out of that and started my own company, Empowering Cloud. And our focus is community research and enablement. So for years, I've done blogging and MVP and that whole thing. And I wanted to see if I can make that more of a full-time gig rather than a part-time gig. And so the model is we have some great sponsors who back us for content. We have 36 subject matter experts producing content over on empowering.cloud, and it's all free to access, free research, free content. We just want to produce the best stuff we can, and some great sponsors that help us do that. And then on the enablement side, we help enterprises with business change. I think we're going to get into later the message center, the roadmap. So that's what keeps me more than busy.
Now, I won't say you're showing your age, but you did mention some fairly old technology in Link and things like that. So you've obviously got, you're very experienced in the UC side and now with Microsoft Teams as well. So you are also an MVP, and you've just come back from Microsoft. We've just had the MVP Summit. You were lucky enough to be there in person. I was there remote, still working through quite a few sessions. But how was it in person?
Yeah, it was great. It was really nice. I didn't go last year. They kind of had a bit of a mini kind of hybrid session last year. I think this year they got hybrid a lot more right. So they had really decent moderators in the room. They pushed mics around for questions. They're still being there, still great for the private meetings, the corridor conversations. So, but yeah, content wise, it was good, and people wise, it was great.
Obviously, we can't share pretty much anything that was happening in the conference at the moment. That's right. But what I can say is one of the hot topics, and obviously it's no secret that AI, generative AI, and obviously Copilot is a hot topic and will be, well, at least for the foreseeable future anyway. We were talking off air just before we hit record that there's different. When we're talking about Copilot, there's lots of different Copilots. I mean, it's not just one single thing. We've got Copilot in Word and PowerPoint and Teams and Outlook and OneNote and lots of different, let's just say different Copilots. Now, that's just that. We were talking about Teams. Tell me a little bit about just inside of Teams, the different experiences inside there.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because I think Microsoft have done a really good job with the branding in one sense here, right? They've captured the world's imagination, Wall Street's imagination with this Copilot brand, originally from GitHub and now been adopted to all the products. And I think it's a great branding in the sense of it's your assistant, it's not doing it for you. But in the same way that brand is great, Microsoft has spread it over every AI product, but they all work slightly differently. So Copilot in Word works differently to Copilot in Excel, works differently to Copilot, just Copilot or Copilot with commercial data protection. And within Teams, the story is even more interesting because we have a Copilot experience in chat and channels. We have a different Copilot experience in meetings, and we have access to, big Copilot, what was Copilot on the web surfaces as a chat experience in Teams as well. So quite challenging for users to understand, well, I can do this thing in Word, but I can't do it in Excel. But also I can do this thing in a meeting that I can't do in channel chat and vice versa.
So are you seeing, you're obviously doing, you mentioned before you're doing a lot of change and adoption and things like that. One of and I've spoken to a number of people on the pod previously as well about this kind of topic, but when organizations are rolling out Copilot, I mean, what I think and what I've found is really important is having, a specific scenario or different types of scenarios for different people. They're going to use Copilot or a Copilot in an application completely differently to the next person. So marketing people, for example, might be using Copilot to, help them generate or start content or, have email campaigns or things like that. Whereas, an executive that's in and out of meetings, all day is going to be using that inside of Teams and the meeting side of Copilot. So how have you seen, well, either you guys internally or, the customers that you're dealing with, do you think that's an important sort of first step before turning the lights on?
It's super important. Also, I mean, just think about it very pragmatically, the investment, so nearly everybody now in Office 365, Microsoft 365 gets Copilot with commercial data protection included. So that's a relatively easy kind of, I can give my users that, it's secure, they can start doing some things. There's sort of less pressure there to generate an ROI, but if you want people to get the benefit of it, you definitely need some training. Then when you get into the line of business apps with M365 Copilot, into Teams, into Excel, into Outlook, you want to be helping the users understand their use case. And I think you're right. Unfortunately, it's not super scalable, but you need to spend time with the users seeing what they're using and help them understand, okay, you're a super busy exec, so actually it's going to be about catch me up with my recent communications with my direct team, like what they shared with me, what's going on, summarize this meeting for me, help me with my emails. As you say, a marketing creative, it might be very different. It might be, we've just done a podcast, help me make that into a blog, or we've just done, these conversations with customers, what were the key topics that could be content, that kind of thing.
Because if you don't, I mean, share your insights here too, but I think what I've seen is that the impact of Copilot when it's first made available, I guess, that the spike in the usage is quite dramatic, and people are, it's a new thing, new toy. Some people would say they'll use it, they'll get on board with it, and then all of a sudden it'll just the usage will just wane. So it really does need to become, I guess, part of your daily work routine almost. You need to really retrain the way that you're thinking.
It's a habit change, right? So we saw the same thing. I've lived through this kind of going from email to unified communications, right? People are addicted and went to email. They have their folders, they have their process. Getting those people to move over to what was instant messaging and now chat and now channels is quite hard. And it's about, put some effort into consciously change. It's the same thing with AI. I think things like meeting recap are relatively easy to understand and to get value from. But beyond that, getting people to have the habit of using it. And also, I think understanding that it's not perfect. Microsoft obviously, will go in very bullish on the marketing story. I will go in saying, you're going to get about 60%, 70% right here. You're going to have to tune it up, but it's saving you time. Like, that's the thing. It's not going to be perfect. If you go in saying, oh, first time I try, it's not perfect, that's not the goal. So I think, working with users to understand how they can build it into their routine and genuinely save them time and money. And guess what? If they can't save time or money with it, it's not the right tool for them, and that's okay too. But I think there are plenty of good use cases for people that, can get value from it.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, what about you personally? I mean, how is it saving you time, and what part of what experience is helping you the most?
Yeah, so I mean, we're a very small team. We're still very much in kind of that startup phase, just 2 years in. So I wear a dozen hats, right? So I'm a content creator. I help with the team. Some of the things that stand out for me, I think number one is catching up with my team, so I can say what's the latest between me and Lindsay, our community manager, and it will span our direct chat, our channels, our emails, and say, oh, Lindsay shared this file with you, you had this conversation, this is pending. That I love, because it keeps me more on the pulse of when I have those conversations with people. Let's have the pertinent conversations. Meeting recap, use it all the time. Like my entire day is like, content and meetings, a podcast. So being able to summarize. Outside of just Copilot, we do a lot of, we have 150 videos on Empowering Cloud. We run all of those through AI. We have summaries. We can also search through them to find different content across all those videos. And we're doing more and more with the change stuff in AI as well. So we have a massive Azure database of all the roadmap and all the message center. And it's super interesting to see what you can do with that. So range of scenarios there, from kind of knowledge worker to product person, and we're using AI across the board.
AI. So what aspects of AI there that you're finding beneficial for that type of scenario?
Yeah, on the content stuff, the summarization is awesome. So like being able to take a 15-minute subject matter expert briefing and say tease out the key bullets for a summary. And I'd say it's still 70% like of the way there, 80% of the way there. Maybe we end up human tuning it. What I'm excited about is, with the ability to do your own GPTs and your own kind of mini models, taking things like all the subject matter expert content we've got and all the change information we've got, and starting to build that together and saying, like, what were some of the key topics or the key impacting changes over the last 6 months? It's stuff that an individual couldn't do. There's too much data, and it's exciting how fast it's moving. Again, I wouldn't say it's perfect by any stretch. It needs human kind of oversight, but just the ability, and you must have seen this, I know you're doing a lot too on the content front, but the ability to take content and kind of say, pick out the key points, summarize this for me, really helps me day to day.
Yeah. So are you using, as I think this conversation the other day, are you using ChatGPT as well as Copilot?
I kind of have a hand in everything, to be honest, to keep me honest. So I have ChatGPT. We use an awesome interface for ChatGPT called Typing Mind, which is like a third-party interface, and that lets you actually pick different models out. So not just ChatGPT, you can do the Claude, you can do the Google models. So that's quite good, because I like to stay honest with what are Microsoft delivering with their Copilot variant and what's the rest of the industry delivering. We use Azure OpenAI on Azure for some of the content stuff, and I'm using M365 Copilot. I'd say most of my typical scenarios I'll default to Copilot now, just because we have the M365 Copilot, but sometimes I will drop into Typing Mind just to see what the difference is.
How important do you think using Copilot for for emails and I guess more text generation? How important do you think, with, again, we were talking before about this prompt engineering as people people have coined that term.
I love that term. Yeah. Such a tech industry thing to do, take something that's like a text prompt and be like, let's make this sound engineering-y.
Well, there was discussion about that being one of the hottest jobs. There'd be job roles that you'll be a prompt engineer. Now, what about in terms of content generation or text generation? How important do you think it, and do you see benefit from longer prompt engineering, where you're sort of feeding in examples of your tone? So it could be transcripts of your podcast or your videos or things like that. And I guess you don't really teach it, but does that give you a better outcome? Yeah, that type of thing.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I've swayed towards more summarization than generation. And I've found with the generation, it tends to default to a little bit. I'm British, right? So it's all kind of reserved and very pragmatic, even slightly, kind of like downtone, if anything, and it all comes out very hypey and be like, this is the best thing ever, and this and that, and explosions and lights, and so the generation, and that speaks, as you say, to the style. Maybe if I fed it a bunch of model content, it would get the style. But I'm more bullish on summarization than generation, because I think generation, unless the person using it gets that this is an outline to tune, I think their expectation is too high. They're like, oh, this will generate me the report to give to my boss. It's like, well, no, it will give you a jump start. It's back to you introed the conversation. It's like, it's your assistant, and it's not like a PhD assistant, right? It's like a junior assistant. So you are still responsible for the outcome. What have you found? Have you tried kind of teaching it style?
Yeah, I have, and I've actually fed in some really long prompts. So, giving sort of 3 examples of different. I use transcripts from whether it's podcasts or videos or whatever. There'll be, a couple of paragraphs of different examples of the way that I communicate.
Yeah.
Because you're right, you want to, and you find this with ChatGPT as well, I reckon, in that it comes back, that the content that comes back is really embellished, and it'll start. You can actually see people or content that's out there now, whether it's full of emojis or it's
you can see it a mile off
all of
LinkedIn,
that sort of stuff.
LinkedIn or Twitter, it's like super verbose to get a point across, whereas my entire thing is like get the point across in as little bullets as possible, and you say scattered with emojis and overly hyped, like game-changing, world-beating,
revolutionizing or streamlining, or those type of terms tend to be part of a lot of the content that comes back. I think so, but I find I find when you feed when you feed some examples. I find that what comes back is actually a lot better than if you didn't do that. So
I think Microsoft, you might know better than me, but I think Microsoft has said publicly they're kind of working on style and how it could start to consume some of your content, automatically. Things like signing off emails, it will sign off a different way to how you do by default, and it's a dead giveaway to people externally. I'm also interested in your opinion on, are we going to end up saying, I saw on a Microsoft blog the other day, they said this blog was partly generated by Copilot. Like, are we going to end up having to say
disclaimers?
This was also a slightly AI-fied.
Yeah, I think I've started seeing that as well. I don't know, to be honest. I mean, I kind of expect it now. I mean, most organisations that are putting stuff out there, content out there, I'm sure would have some part of that, whether it's started by, just generating the initial drafts or things like that, which for me is completely okay, as long as, you can pick the things that are just copied and pasted. But it's just like having your assistant, right? If it's your assistant starting a draft, I mean, it's the same thing.
Yeah, I'm kind of with you, because like, you wouldn't say this document's been spell checked or this document was made on a computer, not by hand. Like, I feel like that's this journey where it's going to be, obviously there was some AI involved because there's AI in everything all the time. But to your point, do you stand behind the content? And something I'm very passionate about on the content side is, I've been doing my email list and my blog for literally over a decade, worryingly. And like, it's about you being behind the content and trusting you're doing your best job and whatever else. I think we're going to see a lot, sadly, of also generated content that will, be a very low bar. Like, a marketing team generating 100 blogs. Like, well, what value is that providing to who, would be my question.
Yeah, absolutely. Now let's change tack a little bit now and move into, I guess, change and adoption, and I guess the rate of change, which has always been, I guess, has always been there with Microsoft 365, and it's just kind of almost expedited now with Copilot and the rate of change there as well. But I guess it's always been there. Tell me a little bit about what you're doing and how you're helping, I guess, how you're helping organisations stay on top of that change.
Yeah, it's a fun one. So as we spun up Empowering Cloud, I went and talked to kind of 12 of enterprises I've worked with previously and said, look, I'm not doing any more one-to-one strategic consulting. What could we do potentially to add value to you? Time and time again, it came back like, we're either struggling with the pace of Microsoft 365 change, like what's happening, or we've got different business groups within our enterprise and they look after Exchange and we look after Teams and they look after phone, and we're struggling to all change coherently. So that led us down a path of looking at the message center and the roadmap. We work with a great guy, you probably know Tom Morgan, another MVP, and we're pulling all the roadmap from the public roadmap website. We're pulling all the message center messages from individual tenants, pulling that all into Azure, We then we actually run that through Azure OpenAI as a first pass to summarize it. We then human review it, we tag it, we look at it, and we do a monthly call with those customers to help them understand it. And Tom's written a bot that pushes those summaries of the items into Teams, into channels, into a Microsoft list for management on their side, and we use Power BI for reporting. So it's helping them stay on top of the massive flood of change. And as you say, it's been around for a while. Like Teams was the big product, and now Copilot's the big product. But just looking at some of our stats, there's been 740 message center messages in the last 6 months. So January 81, February 168, March 95, September 31 when everybody went on holiday, October 111. Like it's crazy. And then on the roadmap side, if I just put up the report, 821 items in the last 12 months. Like it's an insane amount of change.
Well, are there certain products that are sort of leading the pack there? You can probably take from that, the areas of investment or things like that too, I guess.
You totally can. Yeah, we break it down via product, and Teams has historically been the big one. Like that got a lot of innovation. Interestingly, although Copilot is taking over in terms of mind share, it's incrementing, and not everything is necessarily hitting the roadmap or the message center. So by message, things like Teams, SharePoint, OneDrive still tend to dominate. Purview is going pretty big. A lot's going on in kind of compliance. But you're right, you can start to see, if you forecast the roadmap, you can see where Microsoft are adding features. And now what I'm monitoring, which is super interesting, well, I think so anyway, if you're into this, is how much is coming out as premium versus standard core. We've got Planner Premium, we've got Teams Premium, we've got SharePoint Premium, we've got Copilot as an add-on in M365. And you can see a skew towards investing in premium features now, which is interesting.
Are organisations, with the amount of information that is on the roadmap and that is being released, it's probably not going, every organisation is not going to need to, I guess, know everything. It can be kind of overwhelming with that amount of stuff to stay on top of. Do you think it's important for organisations to sort of focus on key things rather than just trying to take everything in?
Yeah, I think you'd kill yourself if you try to take everything in. It depends on the size of your team. So we work with some very large organizations. They literally have product owners. Like they'll have a Teams product owner, and then they'll have a messaging product owner and a Teams phone product owner and a meetings product owner, that kind of scale. But that's the exception. Then you have more typically, they'll have a service owner for, say, the whole of Teams or the whole of SharePoint. And then you get down a tier again, it might be one person who owns M365. And to your point, it's impossible to keep on top of it all as a single person. So you either have to spread that out, or we rank the changes by user impact and admin impact.
Okay.
And we say, if you're limited on time, just hit the highs. Like have your user adoption team look at the highs for user impact, have your admin team look at the highs for admin impact. And one of the things we do that's appreciated by our customers is we can tune the messages. So if you don't use Viva, auto close all the Viva engaged ones. You don't use it. If you don't use Purview, auto close all the Purviews. So we can cut that number down drastically based on your actual usage, because that's one of the challenges of Message Center as well. Is it's different on every tenant based on your location and licensing. But there's a lot pushed through there that if you don't care about that product, may not be super relevant for you.
Well, there's a lot of people that just wouldn't even go in there. I mean,
no. Like I would say, by number of tenants, probably the majority of customers just let it fly. If you're in any kind of multi-thousand user organization, usually that's the point where you get into ISO, ITIL, service management, user impact, risk, and certain verticals, legal, FinServ, pharma, people that, if a change went wrong with their users, they would impact in a user experience revenue kind of way, or people that just take IT a bit more seriously. Like we're spending multiple hundreds of thousands with Microsoft here. Are we getting the most out of this? Copilot rolls out with CDP, commercial data protection, included in the SKU. That's a fantastic value add that you don't have to pay for. But if you're not paying attention, you're not going to see it and get the value out of it. So there's a kind of risk element to this and a best practice, and there's a making the most of my investment best practice as well.
Mm. Now, with all the bells, I guess all the bells and whistles, and we've got AI and Copilot and all this stuff that's happening. We see a lot of new stuff, new shiny things coming, new marketing, marketing materials and videos coming out from Microsoft. Do you still see with the customers that you work with? I mean, Teams is probably a good example. The maturity of organisations. Are they actually ready for all of this new stuff?
Yeah, mostly not in enterprise. Like, it's hard. They're still in a very server first model. A lot of them, like, we work and choose when we deploy the features. I talk about Microsoft 365 as a treadmill. Like, once you're on, and you've got to keep up. But I mean, it's starting to change. People are taking user adoption more seriously. There's usually someone in house whose job is, and this is always a litmus test of how seriously you take it from my point of view. It's like, is there an FTE or a team of FTEs that are about user adoption, business transformation, business change? Because you're spending this number with Microsoft on your EA. How much are you spending to drive that value into the business? If you're not spending anything on that, I always think it's you're not going to get the most out of it. But yeah, things you say, Teams is a great example. There have been so many features pumped into Teams that are great, but the users might still be struggling with some of the fundamentals.
Is that because they just don't know that these new features exist, or they don't have a use case for them? I guess it's similar to what we were talking about with Copilot. I mean, there can be some amazing, what on the surface look like amazing features inside of Teams, but for different people, they just might not get the benefit from it.
Yeah, I think you've hit on two things there. One is discovery, like a feature appears, it's 7 clicks deep in Teams. Is anybody going to find it? And that's why Microsoft increasingly want to push things out and not just across Teams, but they'll push things out as on by default, and they'll even start to toast users, which I'm not a fan of. But they're trying to push, hey, there's a new thing. But I think also in technology, we tend to misassume that users can make the leap between, if this is the feature, this is the use case for you. And that's generally not true. Like particularly with Copilot, you need to spend some time with the users being like, well, what are you trying to achieve? And then, a user adoption person or a technologist or a business analyst can say, oh, okay, I see what you're trying to do. This is how you might use Copilot. You might use meeting transcription. And I think, unfortunately, we're still lacking on the business side in terms of putting that investment to making sure people get the most out of the tools.
Are you finding that the businesses or the organizations that you work with are starting to get on board with that, the continuous change? I mean, change, traditionally is always, well, a lot of times not even included in engagements and things like that. Whereas now it's sort of, coming around where it's just an ongoing thing that sort of never ends.
Yeah, I think they mostly are like, there's an understanding there's a gap there at least. I mean, when some really big changes happen, like we're just, as we record, we're just going through the Teams client transformation from 1.0 to 2.1, the new Teams client, like big changes like that impact user experience. And then with the AI stuff, again, very user impacting. Either if you turn it off, you need to explain to users why it's off. If you're leaving it on, you explain how to do it. So I think most service owners or, Microsoft 365 modern workplace owners would agree there's a need there. Have they convinced the business of the ROI of that change management and adoption team? Sometimes not. I think there's work to do there.
How do you suggest, or are there any best practices on, I guess, trying to measure the impact of change?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing, right, is measure it. Like, that's the thing. Lots of people don't even measure at all. In terms of what you measure, I always like to look at, like, here's your enterprise agreement. Here's what you're buying from Microsoft that somebody thought was a good value for your business, right? Because that's why you buy software. Let's look at the usage stats out of Microsoft 365. The native reports, they're not perfect, but they're pretty good for an indication of who's using what. Let's talk to the business leaders. If you have some kind of digital champions network, that's fantastic. But I would say part of the value prop of Microsoft 365 is you taking what Microsoft have given you and adapting it and leveraging it for your business use cases. So that doesn't happen by itself. You don't whack down your credit card and suddenly everybody gets how to use Teams and Loop and SharePoint and OneDrive and Outlook. And it's getting easier. People can get by. They won't not be able to do the basics of their job, but will they be getting maximum value unless you invest? Not likely.
Yeah, look, I think it's a really important point. You've got to be able to measure. There's been a lot of discussion if we go back to Copilot. A lot of debate and things like that over the cost of a Copilot license. I mean, now that the seats have come down from 300 to that's now non-existent. But then the debate was, or the argument was, it's too expensive. But I reckon you can, for every single person in every single organisation, you can justify the monthly amount. And I was, the Microsoft were doing an AI tour, or they're doing it globally at the moment. There was one in Sydney recently. They had the Commonwealth Bank here in Australia. Their CIO was on a panel, and he was discussing. They offered. Or the impact of how the impact on employees Copilot had. They offered their employees I think it was a $50, this is Australian dollars, $50 a month meal voucher or a Copilot license. So this was a monthly thing, right? So it was $50 a month on meals or a license in Copilot. And it was around about, don't quote me on this, but it was around about 78% opted for a Copilot license as opposed to, a meal voucher. Now, I don't know what that says about Commonwealth Bank's meals and food and things like that, but you can see that, it does have a significant impact on the way people are working.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think in most knowledge worker use cases, you can find a way to save the equivalent time or effort or gain the clarity. The difficulty of that conversation is, even though that's true, all the accounts team who are responsible for the P&L see is you've just added all this cost in hard cost, and you've said all my people are more productive, but where does that balance on the balance sheet?
Yeah.
So you have to really prove it, and that's where the data comes in of usage. And I think you have to stay on top of that as well, because as you said at the start of the pod, you deploy Copilot, everybody's excited and hyped and they use it, and then that can fall off if you don't use adoption. So are people getting value out of it? And as the Copilot capabilities only get better, and they will, are people gaining the new capabilities? So it's a fun conversation to have at the moment. I've got multiple organizations that immediately bought their 300 seats to kind of do a pilot. But they're now having to spend considerable time in helping the users understand what the value is before they'll go up to 3,000 or 100,000.
Yeah. Now, look, mate, as we wrap things up, you put out a hell of a lot of content across different channels, some really insightful things. You share a lot of good, valuable content. Now, for the people, wanting to follow you, learn more about what you're doing and just stay up to date, I mean, you share a lot of good stuff. So where's the best place for people to either get in contact with you or just to, connect with you and follow along?
Yeah, I appreciate that. LinkedIn is definitely the primary for me. I have so many good conversations on there. So the platform-wise, LinkedIn. I have a monthly newsletter, so you can find that at tomtalks.blog. And all the content for Empowering Cloud is at empowering.cloud. Again, not just me. There's a team of 36 MTMs, MVPs, MCTs who all produce content for that community. We kind of just steward it. There's about 150 videos there. A lot of team stuff, but also we're expanding out into security, governance, and of course Copilot. So 15-minute or less briefings if you've got some time. I highly recommend that content as well.
Very good. I'll put all the links to all of those channels and everything like that in the show notes. So if you are watching or listening and you want to connect with Tom and different channels, they'll be there as well. Been a good chat, mate, and it's very exciting times for everybody involved working in this space, let alone actually using the technology as well day in and day out. So appreciate you jumping on, and we'll have to do it again, mate.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me on the pod. I've really been enjoying your pod as well. You've had some great guests on. So we'll definitely, maybe we'll give it a few months and we'll see where we all stand with the Copilot story for sure.
We will. No worries. Thanks, buddy.
Thanks.